Hello everyone, today we'd like to talk about chapter 14. So chapter 14 focuses on firms' behavior in a competitive market. So previously, actually we already learned the cost in different type of cost in chapter 13, right? And we know economists, they break out cost into explicit cost and implicit cost, right? And we might focusing on economic profits rather than accounting profits. We also learned marginal cost, right? So marginal cost, we told you that MC, marginal cost, plays a very important role in the firm's cost structure. And do you still remember how we compute marginal cost? Marginal cost measures what's the additional cost if we add one more unit of the output, right? So this is the way that we compute for marginal cost. And we also know that the marginal cost curve will always lead the average total cost curve and average variable cost curve. So let's see, we can just refresh how we draw a different cost curve. Okay, so here, if we have the quantity, if we have the quantity on horizontal axis and cost here on vertical axis, first we can draw a marginal cost curve. Okay, we know the marginal cost curve should be kind of like a U shape. Okay, so this is marginal cost curve. Okay, I just put MC here represents for marginal cost curve. Then based on this, I can draw an average total cost curve. So this is what we already learned in chapter 13. Okay, so this is average total cost curve. And pay attention, marginal cost curve and average total cost curve intersect at a minimum. So this will be the minimum point. This is the minimum average total cost. Okay, so this point here represents for average, minimum average total cost curve. And based on this, we can draw an average variable cost. So average variable cost always below average total cost curve. So that should be average variable cost curve. Okay, this is average variable cost curve. Okay, similar. Marginal cost curve intersect at a minimum of average variable cost curve. Oh, average. So sorry, marginal cost curve always intersect at a minimum point of average variable cost curve. And you can notice the way that I draw her average total cost curve and average variable cost curve, you can notice the vertical distance. So you can see this will be the vertical distance, right? The vertical distance between these two curves reduced as we have more outputs. Do you know why? Because the difference is here. Average total cost subtract average variable cost is our average fixed cost, right? And we already learned that in chapter 13, the average fixed cost is equal fixed cost divided quantity, right? Fixed cost doesn't change. However, with more quantity, we will have this average fixed cost would decline as we have more quantity. And this is why make it the vertical distance between average total cost and average variable cost shrink as we have more outputs. Okay, so this is the way that we can draw for those curves. And those are concepts we already learned in chapter 13. And I already told you this graph is very, very important through chapter 13 and chapter 14. Now let's see what we were learned in chapter 14. So in chapter 14, actually we try to answer different questions. The first one will be, what is perfectly competitive market? This part we already learned in chapter 1 and in chapter 4. So this part is just a review. And then we'll move on to what are the marginal revenue. So you can see we not only need to consider about the marginal cost, we also need to learn the marginal revenue and how this marginal revenue related to average and total revenue. Okay, Then we'll move on to how does a competitive market or how does a competitive firm decide the quantity to be produced. Okay, so you can think about if you are a manager of a competitive firm, so how you decide how many units the company should produce. And when my competitive firm shut down in the short run or exit in the long run. So here you notice I use two different verbs. Okay, in the short run we said the firm might shut down, but in the long run we said the firm might exit. Then at the end, we would like to learn what does the market supply curve looks like in the short run and in the long run. Okay, so those are the several parts we try to find the answers in this chapter. Now let's look at the first one. Suppose 3 years after graduating, okay, you run your own business and you must decide how much to produce, right? What price to charge and how many workers to hire, etc. Okay, so those are what we call the business decision you need to make. So what factors might affect these decisions? This is what we need to learn in this chapter. Your cost, you need to learn, right? Your cost, you need to think about the labor cost, the capital cost. You might also think about how much competition you face. Do you facing a lot of competitors in the market? And we will begin by studying the behavior of firms in perfectly competitive market. Okay, so chapter 14, we're focusing on perfectly competitive market. We might learn different market structures in later chapters. So first, let's just review what we have learned before about characteristics of perfect competition. We know in the perfect competitive markets, we have numbers of buyers and sellers, and they offer the identical products. They offer the identical products. Firms will be no barriers to entry or exit the market. Okay, so it will be easier for firm to enter the market, and firms will also feel no pressure to exit the market. So no barriers of entry and exit. Because of those characteristics, then we would like to talk about that firms in this perfectly competitive market, they are actually the price taker. Okay, the price taker. So this is what we already learned previously. Now let's look at revenue. So revenue, we already learned that revenue will equal, or we say the total revenue, okay? Actually equal price times quantity, right? We learned this concept in chapter 4 when we talk about market demand and market supply. So P times Q measures the revenue. And average revenue is just use total revenue divide quantity, right? So if it is in a perfectly competitive market, P times Q divide Q, you can notice here we can eliminate Q. So we will have average revenue just equal price. Marginal revenue. So how we get a marginal revenue? So this concept is important. Marginal revenue measures what's the additional revenue that you produce one more unit. Okay, so this is the way that we compute marginal revenue. What's the additional revenue that this additional unit of output can bring to you? Let's look at how we compute their marginal revenue. Look at this table. The first column shows the quantity, right, from 0 to 5. The second column shows the price. So you can notice the price always at $10, which means this is in a perfectly competitive market. Nothing changed in price. Everyone just a price taker. So what about the total revenue? The total revenue will just use the price times quantity, right? So we can use the numbers on the second column times the numbers on the first column correspondingly. Okay. So for example, if there is no quantity, then we know there is no total revenue. Okay. If quantity equal 1, the price equal 10, then we have the total revenue will equal 10 times 1 equal $10, right? And if there are 2 units, then we notice the total revenue equal 2 times 10, which will be $20, etc. Then the average revenue. So average revenue, based on what we just have here, you will use the total revenue divide Q, right? So it will just equal price. So we can just put all the $10 on the fourth column. Then how about the marginal revenue? Marginal revenue, for example, when a quantity equal 1, we use the total revenue. If there is 1 unit, subtract the total revenue if there is no output. Divide the change in quantity will be 1 minus 0, right? So we have the total revenue when there is 1 unit, we notice it will be $10, right? And subtract 0, divide 1, you will equal $10, right? And how about a marginal revenue if there are 2 units? So we still have the change in total revenue if there are 2 units, subtract the total revenue if there is only 1 unit, and then divide 2 minus 1. So we have $20 subtract $10 divide 1 still equal $10, etc. You can compute the marginal revenue at different quantity, and then it will be surprising to find that marginal revenue will also fix at $10. Okay, so this is what we can compute. We can finish this table. Okay, and you can notice in the perfectly competitive markets, we have this marginal revenue will equal price, right? Will equal price. Now let's move on. You can see marginal revenue equal price. So marginal revenue equal price is only true for perfectly competitive markets. It cannot hold if we are in other market structure. So a competitive firm can keep increasing its output without affecting the market price. So at each unit of output, it will increase only by quantity. Okay, it will increase only by quantity. Therefore, we have marginal revenue will equal price. And this is only true for competitive firms. If in a monopoly firm, their marginal revenue will be larger than price. Okay, so this is only true for firms in competitive markets. Now let's look at, we now have marginal cost, we now have marginal revenue. Then how can we make decision to maximize the profit? So this is what we'll talk about, profit maximization rule. Firstly, okay, we will compare the marginal revenue to marginal cost. This is what we need to do first, okay? Because if you produce 1 more unit, and we know this 1 more unit will bring you additional revenue, right? However, this 1 more unit will also cost your additional, will cost more, right? Make you have the actual cost to produce that 1 more unit. Therefore, we need to make sure and we need to compare that marginal revenue and marginal cost. So marginal revenue, we know it will equal the change in total outputs divides the change in quantity, right? And marginal cost will equal the change in total outputs divides the change in quantity. Therefore, we can get the marginal profit. So if you think about I producing 1 more unit, it will bring more marginal revenue than marginal cost. Will you produce that unit? Of course you will, because you will get actual profit, right? However, if producing 1 more unit will make you lose, okay, rather than earning, will you produce that unit? Probably you will not, right? So here we have the marginal profit. Marginal profit will equal marginal revenue subtract marginal cost. And then the profit maximization rule here, profit will maximize by choosing the level of the output such that these two equal to each other, okay? Marginal revenue equal marginal cost. So you might think about what should firm do if the marginal cost marginal revenue larger than marginal cost. If we have the marginal revenue larger than marginal cost, then firm can keep producing, right? Or keep increasing the output until marginal revenue equal marginal cost. And what firm will do if the marginal revenue less than marginal cost? Firms were reducing production. Reducing the production until marginal revenue equal marginal cost. Okay, so this is why we say in order to maximize the profit, we need to always choose the output level which will make marginal revenue equal marginal cost. Okay, make this output level will have marginal revenue equal marginal cost. Think at a margin is the things that we talk about in the first chapter, right? In the first chapter, we already told you that margin is a very typical micro concept, right? And then we'll say if quantity increased by one more unit, revenue increased by marginal revenue and cost will increase by marginal cost. Therefore, we will always choose the quantity that can make marginal revenue equal marginal cost. Now, since the firm is the price taker, right? Because it is in a competitive market, and then we notice that in a competitive market, price, this is the market equilibrium price or equal marginal revenue, right? And when it equal to marginal cost, we can have our profit maximization. Okay, we can have our profit maximization. So let me show you this in a graph. Okay, I cannot have this graph showing in a very good color. So let me just draw this graph for you. Okay, so let me just draw the graph here. Remember that we will choose the quantity can make our marginal revenue equal to the marginal cost, right? And then I also want to show this part through a graph. So let me just draw the graph for you. And let me erase these first. Assume this is the quantity, okay, and this is the price. So first, I will draw a horizontal line. Okay, so this horizontal line means the market price will always fix at this level. Okay, and remember in a perfectly competitive markets, price will also equal to marginal revenue. Okay, and then how can we get the marginal cost curve? Do you still remember at the beginning of this class, we just review marginal cost curve, right? So this should be the marginal cost curve. And we need to find out a point, the output that can make marginal revenue equal marginal cost. So we need to find out the intersection point of marginal cost curve and marginal revenue curve. Okay, so here this point, at this point, look at this point, okay? At this point here, we have marginal revenue equal marginal cost, right? So you can just find out a quantity here. So that could be the quantity that can maximize the profit. So there will be the profit that can maximize the profit. Then from this graph, can you get which area will represent for profit? So let me add one more curve. because here we don't have the average total cost curve, right? So I can add average total cost curve. This is the average total cost curve, okay? And average total cost curve intersect at a minimum point of marginal cost curve, right? So through this graph, look at this area, okay? So look at this area. You just draw a vertical line, right, across all the curve here, and then you can find out the intersection point on average total cost curve, and this could be average total cost at Q star. Okay, that could be average total cost at Q star, and then what you need to do is draw a rectangular here. Okay, this area will represent for profit. Okay, so this rectangular here will represent for profit, because profit will equal total revenue subtract total cost, right? And total revenue is equal price times quantity at Q star, right? And what about total cost? It will equal average total cost at Q star, right? This is what we have. Average total cost at Q star times Q star. So finally, you equal P subtract average total cost at Q star times Q star, and which will be the area of this rectangular showing on this graph. Understand? So profit will equal price times, will equal price subtract average total cost at Q star, okay, times Q star. So this is the way that we can compute for profit. In this case, okay, we have the quantity here will equal a unit, okay? And then we will have the price will be at $10, okay? So $10 is the price, and average total cost at Q star is equal $8.75. So in this case, we will have our profit to equal $10 subtract $8.75, and then times 8, which will equal $10. Okay, so this $10 showing up on this graph, okay, is this rectangular. Understand? Now let's look at one question. So look at this graph, look at this table. It show you the first column show you the cases, which could be the quantity, okay? The second column show you the average cost. So this average cost will be the average total cost. Now, suppose you are the owner of the firm producing jelly beans at average cost per case in the table below. Okay, so if you produce 200 cases, then your average cost is 200, okay? If you're producing 201 cases, then your average is $201. Understand? Initially, you produce 200 cases of jelly beans per period. Then there is a new customer, okay? Calls and places an order for one case. So it requires to increase your outputs from 200 cases to 201 cases. She offered you $350 for that case. So will you accept this offer? Why or why not? Will you accept this offer? Look at this table. Producing 201 cases, the average cost is $201. And then this customer offer you $350 for that case. Seems it works, right? Seems it's profitable. So will you accept this offer or not? If your answer is yes, then I will tell you you will lose your money. Why? Do you still remember the way that we made decision? We will always find out a quantity that will make marginal revenue larger than equal marginal cost, right? So first, if this customer offer you $350 for that case, which means selling one more case will bring you marginal revenue equal 350, right? So now what you need to do is to get a marginal cost. If the marginal cost less than 350, then you will definitely accept this offer because you earn money, you earn profit. If the marginal cost larger than $350, then you will decline this offer because you will reduce your profit. Make sense or not? You can't use the average cost. You can't use your average cost to make a decision. You need to make decision based on marginal cost and marginal revenue. So in this case, how can we get the marginal cost? The marginal cost of that one more case, 300 first, right? One more case will equal the total cost at 201 cases. Subtract the total cost when you're producing 200 cases. Divide 201, subtract 200. Okay? So this is the way that you can get a marginal cost at the additional case. And the total cost at 201 cases will equal 201 cases. That will be the quantity times the average cost times 201, right? Subtract 200 cases, the average cost is 200. Divide 201, subtract 200. Okay? So finally, you will get this number actually larger than $350. So in this case, you will not accept the offer if you consider marginal cost rather than average cost. Understand? So this is very important market decision because you need to make a decision when the marginal revenue equal marginal cost, at least, okay, to make the profit maximization quality rather than using average cost. Understand?